What's up, football heads? Welcome back to that show. As always, I am your host, Kyle McQueen. We are here on a Let Me Talk to You Tuesday, a Victory Tuesday, following a Victory Monday for my Minnesota Vikings. And we will get to that game. I want to start with this other Monday night game because, let's be real, ain't nobody give a shit about this. And then, like I said, we're gonna pull up the ESPN playoff machine. I've been talking about it for a couple weeks now. We're going to pull that out at the end and play out some various scenarios. Like I said, can we get to the bottom of the NFC West? Who's going to win the AFC North? Who are the wild card teams going to be in the NFC and the AFC? We'll play out some scenarios, see what the most likely ones are, some of the long shots, what needs to happen for some of these long shot scenarios to play out. But first, let's start with the secondary Monday night football game. Which let me start off by saying this: they put the Vikings on Monday night. Finally, put the Vikings on Monday night. No, none of the ESPN people show up to that game. They're not on set, on location in Minnesota, where you know their usual cohort on Monday Night Football. Randy Moss has been out now, uh, dealing with cancer. I guess they had it removed, and he's still gonna have to go through chemo and radiation and whatnot. But like that's their guy, and they can't go to Minnesota and celebrate this man. Chris Carter was on hand. Jake Reed was on hand. John Randall was on hand. I'm sure other people, other legendary Vikings were on hand to honor this man. ESPN couldn't be bothered to show up. No, because we got to have two broadcasts because we don't know if Vikings and Bears is good enough to draw ratings. So we got to do two broadcasts. Well, if you don't think it's good enough to draw ratings, why'd you put it there in the first place? Fuck you, ESPN. You suck. ESPN ain't been good in what, 18 years maybe? Trash. But anyway, the secondary Monday night game. The Atlanta Falcons headed to Vegas to the Strip to take on the Raiders. Falcons get a win, a much needed win after this skid that they've been on. They were they 5-2? Were they 6-2? Nah, 6-3, I think. Fell to 6-7. Get back to 7-7. They win 15-9 in just a dumb game. That why this was on a Monday night, I'm sure. I don't know why they didn't flex this out and put something. I guess because this was the secondary game. But either way, like, what's the point? What is the point of this being on a Monday night? There's no point. If it was a standalone game, it should be flexed. And if it's still there and not flexed because, well, we got the Vikings Bears, then why is this on? Why is this on a Monday night? It makes no sense. But the Falcons come out. Kirk finally throws a touchdown pass. It's been about over a month since the man has thrown a touchdown pass. So he gets off the schneid. I bet Kirk Cousins to get 2 passing touchdowns. He only ends up with the one. Throws a pick. And like statistically, you look at this game. Let's look at the game flow first. Raiders get first ball, 12-play drive to go 21 yards. 12 plays, 21 yards. They fumble. Falcons punt. Raiders punt. Then the Falcons get the aforementioned Kirk Cousins 30-yard touchdown to Drake London. Second quarter, Raiders field goal, 7-3. All right. Slow start, but scoring on back-to-back drives. Falcons punt. Raiders safety. Falcons punt. Raiders end of half. First half starts bad, ends bad. In the middle, a touchdown and a field goal. Third quarter, Falcons interception. So Kirk throws another pick. Raiders punt. Falcons go down, get a field goal. 6 plays, 15 yards. Get a field goal. Raiders punt. Falcons punt. Raiders punt. Now we're in the fourth quarter. Falcons go down. They get a field goal. 8 plays, 23 yards. Raiders punt. Falcons punt. Raiders interception. Falcons missed field goal. Raiders finally get a touchdown. Amir Abdullah, 5 yards. Falcons, 8 plays, 10 yards, punt. Raiders, last possession of the game, a touchdown could win it for them, a touchdown and an extra point, and they throw a pick. Just a bad game. The Raiders obviously are specifically the fans now sitting at 2-12. They just want to lose. They want Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur wants to go there. I'm sure they're more than satisfied with this loss. Not the coaching staff, not the players, but probably the organization. Fans certainly. Falcons 7-7. They're only a game back. They got the tiebreaker over the Bucs, but this is the best you can do. 15 points on the Raiders defense. The Raiders defense. How good is the Raiders defense? Not very good. Mid-pack run defense for the most part. Sub mid-pack. They're not awful, but somewhere in the 20s. And no Max Crosby. Max Crosby didn't play in this game. And bad pass defense. Not terrible, but bad again in the 20s. They have allowed 25 passing touchdowns, got just 8 interceptions, one of the worst in the league in that ratio. And then the Falcons, we talked about it last week. Terrible pass defense. Pretty solid run defense. Top 10 in yards per rush allowed. And then I believe 13th in rushing yards total throughout the season. So not terrible. Not great. Solid. Pretty good, I think you would say. But somehow this game 15-9. The best defensive unit in this game is the Falcons' run defense, which is pretty good. Everything else is mid at best, mostly bad, some terrible. The Falcons' pass defense, and we get a 15-9 game. Again, the Falcons, that's the best they can muster. Kirk Cousins, 11 for 17, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now I'll give him credit here. Committed to the run. They ran the ball. Bijan Robinson, 22 carries, 125 yards, averaging 5.68. Tyler Algier, 12 for 43, averaging about 3.5. But 24 rushes to 17 pass attempts. Not going to argue with that. But that's the best we got. 15 points against the Raiders defense with no Max Crosby. Come on, man. Like, I know they're only a game back. They have the tiebreaker over the Bucs. If the Falcons win out and the Bucs lose one game, it's the Falcons division. All they got to do is win one more than the Bucs down the stretch. They win the division. They ain't making the playoffs. I've been saying it for a month, maybe a little longer. Bucs are winning that division because they're a better team. They deserve to win the division. They went in, hung 40 on one of the better defenses in the league in the Chargers. And the Falcons go in, play one of the worst defenses in the league, and they can only muster 15 points. Finally, Kirk, like I said, gets off the schneid, finally gets a touchdown after a month, but 11 for 17, 112 yards. Come on, man. Just dreadful, dreadful football. And then the Raiders. You're starting Desmond Ridder against his former team. Desmond Ridder. 23 for 39, 208 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and then rushing. They ran the ball 17 times. Running backs ran the ball 17 times. Madison, 7 carries for 21 yards, averaging 3 yards a carry. Amir Abdullah, 3 carries for 8 yards, 2.67 yards per carry. Sincere McCormick, 7 carries for 8 yards, 1.14 yard per carry. Now again, Falcons run defense, solid to pretty good, but that's it. You can run the ball 17 times and let Desmond Ridder pass 39 times on a Monday night. What are we doing? All right, oh, Desmond Ridder revenge game. He's going to go out there and gash the Falcons. Well, guess what? He did not. Awful. Just terrible play calling. And again, I didn't watch this shit. I watched my Vikings, obviously. But 17 called runs to 39 pass attempts. What are we doing? Again, Falcons pass defense, atrocious. But you got to have better balance than that. It's Desmond Ridder. It's not like you have like a mid-pack quarterback where you're like, all right, he's a mid-pack quarterback, but terrible pass defense. He can get it done today. No. It's Desmond Ridder. He wasn't even on your roster to start the season. Just an atrocity, absolute atrocity. There's no reason to talk about this game. The Falcons, obviously, they get back to 500. They're a game back with the tiebreaker, but no. I'd love to see the Falcons make the playoffs. And Minnesota, if they don't get the 1 seed, they don't win the North, have to go into Atlanta and beat Atlanta. Because they'll go into Atlanta and beat the dog shit out of Atlanta. They beat the dog shit out of them in Minnesota last week. But they'll go into Atlanta and beat the dog shit out of them. Much rather would play in Atlanta than Tampa Bay, as I'm sure Packers fans would, as I'm sure Commanders fans would, any other potential wildcard team. Detroit, if they stumble here down the stretch and the Vikings steal the 1 seed from them, I'm sure they'd love to go play Atlanta, in Atlanta. Much more than playing in Tampa Bay. I know Eagles fans don't want to play Tampa Bay. Granted, there's no scenario where the Eagles are going to have to go into. I mean, I guess technically there is. They'd have to lose the rest of their games. Commanders have to win out, and then the seeding would have to fall the way it falls. But they don't want to play Tampa Bay. Now, they don't have to, especially if you could play Atlanta instead. But Atlanta, it's not a playoff team. It's not. It's just not a playoff team. It's a bad team. They're not good. Not good. I'm going to see how many sacks they got. Because the last 2 weeks, they finally started putting it together sack-wise. Okay, they got 4 sacks on Vegas. So the last 3 weeks combined, I think they got, I want to say, 40% more sacks in the last 3 weeks than they got all season long prior to that. So good on them for figuring out some kind of pass rush, but just a dreadful game. But the real Monday night game, the actual Monday night game, the Monday night game that we're all here to talk about, the Monday night game that you're all here to listen to, the Monday night game that I was there to watch, my Minnesota Vikings, my now 12-2 Minnesota Vikings put a beat down on the Chicago Bears, who fall to 4-10. Minnesota 30, Chicago 12. And let me tell you, if you didn't watch this game, maybe you're doing some other things. Maybe you're watching wrestling. Maybe you're hanging out with the family for the holidays. Maybe you're a Falcons or a Raiders fan, and for whatever reason you said, I have to watch my team play, even though this game is going to be dog shit and my team sucks. This game should have been 45-0. Easy. Little sloppy from Minnesota, specifically on the offensive line with penalties. A lot of drives that they're rocking and rolling, they're moving the football, and then you end up in a 1st and 20. You end up in a 2nd and 15. And a lot of those drives, they still found ways to convert. Aaron Jones converted on a 3rd and 17 deep in Minnesota territory, threw a little dump off, like a 3-yard dump off pass. He wriggles his way out of a tackle, dives, gets the first down. Or, a couple other drives where, it's 1st and 20 or 2nd and 15, and they chunk it, get their way down there, get the first down. But I'll start with Chicago. Chicago is done. They should just forfeit the rest of their games, because you get little spurts where, like, Keenan Allen's fired up or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, you watch Chicago and, like, they're just they're ready to pack it in, man. They're ready for the offseason. They're ready for Cabo. Even Caleb Williams, like I feel like I like Caleb Williams more than most people at this point. I feel like I like him more than Chicago fans do at this point, more than a lot of the pundits. I saw Dan Orlovsky saying he's the only rookie quarterback in this class that hasn't shown any evolution whatsoever this season. I don't know that I agree with that, but Dan Orlovsky played in the league, so who am I to tell him? But Caleb, 18 for 31, 191 yards, 1 touchdown. Once again, no interceptions, taking care of the football. He did have a fumble on the second drive. They turned the ball over on downs, went for it on 4th down on the first drive. And second drive, fumble. Third drive, punt. Fourth drive, another turnover on downs. And fifth drive, end of half. So the Bears, another third game in a row, 0 first half points. Vikings come out, field goal after the turnover on downs. Second drive, touchdown, Justin Jefferson. He gives a big shout out to Randy Moss into the camera. Come down, next drive, Justin Jefferson drops an easy pass. He was beating himself up for it. People in the stadium said that it took the air out of the crowd for the rest of the second half because it was like we're up 10-0, moving with the ball. Jets, easy catch for sure, gonna be inside the 5. Looked like it was likely gonna be a touchdown. Can't be 100%, but could have been another touchdown for Jets. Could have gone up 17-0 at that point. Bears just gonna pack it in. So that kind of took the wind out of the sails a little bit. So they go up 10-0 at the half, come back with a field goal later on. In the second quarter, 13-0 at the half. 10-0 after the first quarter. Punt fest to start the second half. Punt. I was hoping finally Minnesota would double dip. I feel like they haven't double dipped in years. They got the field goal with like 4 seconds left. Yeah, 4 seconds left here in the first half. Get the ball after the half. They get 5 yards punt. Chicago 7 yards 34 or 7 plays 34 yards punt. Vikings 4 plays 7 yards punt. Bears go down 11 plays 62 yards. Minnesota forced a field goal. This was a drive derailed by penalties because they were moving the ball. And they get a first down. They get down to this. All right, this was this drive. They get to the 1 yard line. The Bears do. Swift runs it in for a touchdown. Kramer, a backup offensive lineman, was in as the fullback, did not report as eligible. And everyone's railing against him. And, I mean, he should have known because it was clearly something that they practiced and they know the rules. So part of that practicing would have been you got to report as eligible. And he did say after the game that the play clock was running down and he just forgot to report. For me, as a fan that's watched for over 20 years, I didn't know. Like, I knew, like, if you're lined up as an extra offensive lineman, you got to report eligible. I didn't know if you were lined up as a fullback, you had to if you're an offensive lineman. Because to me, even if you're a fullback, or even if you're an offensive lineman, you're in as a fullback. A fullback is an eligible position. So, learn something new every week, I suppose. But illegal substitution, 5-yard penalty. Now they're at the 6. They get a 5-yard run right back to the 1 yard line. 2nd and 1. At the goal line. Kramer reports as eligible this time. Swift runs to the left, tackled for a 2-yard loss, but there's a flag on the field. 10-yard penalty on the offense. Now we're 2nd and 11. Incomplete pass. 4th and 11 from the 11. They got to kick a field goal. Vikings get the ball. 16 plays, 72 yards, go down, get a touchdown to Aaron Jones. Finally running the ball inside the 5-yard line for the Vikings. This has been impossible for years now. For whatever reason, they get inside the 5 and they cannot run the ball at all. And And I'm sitting, I'm talking to my dad, and I'm like, Dad, he's like, oh, this is an easy touchdown. I'm like, you have no idea. I would be more shocked if they ran this in on first down than I would be if they had to kick a fucking field goal from the 1 yard line. But they get the touchdown. Like I said, what was it? 16 play drive, 72 yards. So you're the Bears. You're down 13-0 here. Nothing went right for you in the first half. You get the ball all the way down the field to the 1 yard, run it in for a touchdown. Mental error, didn't report. You get the ball back to the 1 yard line. Now it's 2nd and 1 from the 1. And you can't punch it in. If they punch it in, it's 13-7. It's a ball game. Another touchdown, you got the lead. You end up with a field goal, 13-3. Vikings go right down, touchdown. Now it's 20-3 all of a sudden. Should have been 13-7. Now it's 20-3. Fourth quarter, Bears add another field goal. 13 plays, 49 yards. Vikings, what do? 10 plays, 40 yards, go right down the field. Another 1 yard rushing touchdown, this time for Cam Akers. So now you're up 27-6. Bears punt. And then this is where it got cute. It was about 6 minutes left, 27-6. You're up 3 touchdowns, 6 minutes to go. The Bears, I mean, let's be real. The Bears are who we thought they were. And we didn't let them off the hook. But 6 minutes left. It's Bears, Vikings. It's the Vikings. It's Monday Night Football. They had to find a way to make a 21-point game interesting with 6 minutes left. They end up punting. Block punt. Now, the Vikings almost blocked a Bears punt earlier in the game, missed it, ran into the kicker, gave them a fresh set of downs. This time, dude blocks the Vikings punt and just mows into the punter. But if the ball's blocked, you don't get running into the kicker. You don't get roughing the kicker. I hope Ryan Wright's all right. He ran straight into the dude while Wright's leg was still up in the air. It was like a big boot in wrestling. Like, he kicks the ball and the guy just runs straight into him, catches a cleat to the face. Ryan Wright goes backward because his knee fucking gets bent back. So they block it. They go down. 54 seconds, they score a touchdown. It was for a 8-play, 27-yard touchdown drive. It was not great. And they needed a 4th down conversion. But they get the touchdown, missed the 2-point conversion, which they were going to go for 1. Penalty on the Vikings. Offensive line. And puts the ball at the 1. They go for 2. Don't get it. At this point, that after the block punt, Brian Flores put all the backups in. I look up and I see number 20 on the film. I'm like, who the fuck is number 20? Jay Ward. Why is Jay Ward in the game? Then on the next play, Dwight McGlothern, who I feel like Vikings fans who are tapped in, we all like Dwight McGlothern, and we were excited to see him play, finally get on the field on a defensive, get some defensive snaps, not just be on special teams. But you're like, why is Jay Ward in the game? Why is Dwight McGlothern in the game? Why is Fabian Moreau in the game? Why is Kamu Grugier-Hill starting in the base defense at this point where you just had your punt blocked, and like if they get a touchdown here, and again, it's going to take a lot. They burned all their timeouts by this point to get to the block punt. Extreme long shot, but still, it was like, why are the backups in? And then, like, it kind of put me at ease. I was like, all right, well, they're looking at this like, even with the backups out here, they ain't going to do shit against us. They do get the touchdown, 27 yards in 8 plays. But then the Vikings go down 8 plays, 14 yards. 8 plays, 14 yards, but they take 4 minutes and 7 seconds off the clock, kick a field goal because the Bears went for an onside kick, so the Vikings recovered it in Chicago territory. And then Bears run out of time. Game ends. Over. 30-12 is what it is. But the Bears were, awful converting. 8% on third downs. I don't believe they converted a third down until halfway through the 4th quarter. Just atrocious. Pretty even time of possession, 30 minutes and 6 seconds for the Bears, 29 minutes and 54 seconds for Minnesota, 10 penalties for Minnesota, 9 for Chicago. So again, both teams sloppy. But both of them, it was predominantly the offensive line. Cam Robinson, I think, had 3 or 4 penalties. Chicago, the rookie left tackle, had 3 penalties and was getting worked nonstop. But just ugly game. DeAndre Swift, so you ask Vikings fans, like, oh, we were getting cooked on the ground. DeAndre Swift, 19 carries for 79 yards. DJ Moore, 3 for 24. And they were all early in the game. They just decided we're going to run DJ. I think they ran him 3 times on the same drive early in the game. Travis Homer, 3 for 7. Caleb Williams had 4 scrambles for 3 yards. So you give up over 100 yards rushing in total, but you take away the DJ Moore, gadget plays. DeAndre Swift only averaged 4.16 yards per carry. Like, it's not bad. It's not, when week after week where they're the best rushing defense in the league, it wasn't quite that, but still, like, if the worst we're gonna do is 19 carries for 79 yards, I'll take it. I don't think it was that bad. I think Vikings fans need to chill out on the run defense slipping here in the last few weeks, that whole rhetoric. But we'll get Ivan Pace Jr. is expected back for the Green Bay game, the penultimate game of the season. He's a great run defender. They've been putting Josh Metellus in there. Obviously, he was undersized because he's listed as a safety. And not that Ivan Pace isn't undersized, but excellent run defender. So I ain't worried about it. But just, I don't know. The Bears just couldn't get out of their own way. They couldn't convert anything. Caleb Williams is running for his life. And I feel like every time I watch him, I'm like, man, this guy's super slippery. Nobody's been sacked more than he is, but at the same time, he's still damn slippery. And I feel like he's even more slippery against the Vikings for whatever reason. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's just one of those phenomenon. But even still, like, he got hammered. There was one play, he escapes the pocket, jumps over a guy, gets out of another thing, outruns a couple dudes to the sideline, jumps, spins back, fully off the ground, launches the ball way incomplete. And as he's in the air, just gets gored, speared in half, and not driven into the ground the way they would get a penalty, but like gets hit so hard that he just like goes back. They cut to him on the sideline. He walks to the bench, sits on the bench, throws his head back, does one of these, and it's not like when Kyler Murray has bad body language. It's like literally this dude just got his soul knocked out of him and is just trying to like figure out where he is, and he just fully slumps over on his left. I'm like, he might have broke a rib, but he's just laying there on the bench, just like, it was bad, man. It was bad. Let's see how many sacks they got. 2 apiece, so sacks wise, not terrible, but the heat was on Caleb nonstop. He made a couple nice plays for the most part. Vikings handled business on that, but Vikings, Sam Darnold, 24 for 40, 231 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The interception was they were moving the ball. This was the second quarter. They're moving the ball. This was the drive where Jefferson dropped what probably, but definitely could have been a touchdown pass. Would have for sure been inside the 5, probably around like the 2-yard line, maybe if the guy makes the tackle. But the way it all played out, they both kept playing, but Jefferson just left the ball on the ground and he slipped out of the guy's grasp and would have got the touchdown. But right after that, they get a penalty, sets him back. So now they're kind of pushed back from field goal range in no man's land. So they say, fuck it. They get enough back where it's like 4th and 4, I want to say. Fuck it, we're going to go for it. Bears send everybody. Darnold's running for his life. And instead of taking a sack and then the Bears getting the ball even further back, he just throws it up to an area where Jefferson was around there, Hawkinson was around there. So it's like, all right, we got some of our top guys around there. If I take a sack, it's 4th down, they're going to get much better field position. Like, if this gets picked off, like, that's beneficial to us. If the guy dropped the ball, they would have got better position. The interception was the best thing that could have happened to the Vikings in that situation aside from Jefferson or Hawkinson making some crazy circus catch. So I don't. I think it was a good decision on Darnold's part to throw that ball up as opposed to the alternative of taking the sack in that situation. But he was kind of just out of a rhythm after that into the third quarter. And this is where I keep saying the Vikings, they need a quick game. I understand like Darnold's strength is getting the ball downfield, stretching the field. Addison, great downfield threat. We've seen Jefferson get in downfield more as opposed to the intermediate stuff that he's kind of made his name off of in his first 4 years. Hawkinson, obviously, a intermediate demon, but you need a little bit of a quick game. You get into a situation like this where you're just kind of out of a rhythm, and it's not like Darnold was playing skittish. He was sailing some balls, some inaccuracy issues, threw a couple what could have been hospital balls. If things had gone differently, there was a couple. There was one he seeded in there I believe in the fourth quarter on their last touchdown drive. It was like there's like 4 defenders around Jefferson. Jefferson runs into this box of defenders and he just puts it like perfectly as they're all converging. Jefferson took a shot, but Addison caught a ball that he kind of bobbled and then re-grabbed it, and immediately as soon as he secures it, gets absolutely drilled, but he held on to it. But those were 2 like tight window throws where it's kind of the nature of the beast, and they completed the ball. But there's a couple other ones Darnold sailed. Just again, not that he wasn't skittish. It didn't feel like he was like losing confidence. It didn't feel like he was seeing ghosts, but it was just kind of like just not in a rhythm. And if you get a quick game going, that puts you in a position to get the rhythm back, just to get a little bit of a flow going. But eventually he got his flow going again. They get some shit going in the fourth quarter, pull away from the Bears. And again, ultimately, 24 for 40, not terrible. 231 yards, pretty good. 1 touchdown, pedestrian. But again, they had 2 touchdown drives that they ended up on the 1 and ran it in. So that's just kind of last week. They're throwing the ball all over the place. He gets 5 touchdowns this week. Get a couple drives. You get down to the 1. 2 passes to get you down to the 1. So like those very easily could have been touchdowns. Then Darnold could have had 3 touchdown passes. And then the interception, which I don't hold against him. Aaron Jones, 18 carries for 86 yards, 1 touchdown, and he added 2 catches for 20 yards. So I think he was 5.3 yards a touch on 20 touches. Cam Akers, 10 carries for 24 yards and the touchdown. Jefferson 7 for 73 and a touchdown. Addison 7 for 63. Hawkinson 5 for 52. Brandon Powell had a huge conversion for 12 yards. Trent Sherfield had a huge conversion late in the game to keep a drive going. But just a good day. I think ultimately you look here, Aaron Jones, 18 carries, Cam Akers, 10 carries, Ty Chandler, 1 carry, so 29 carries to 40 pass attempts. Not bad. I do think the run game was working because Darnold has played his best games against teams that are blitzing him heavily. He's played his worst games and his more middle subpar games against teams that just drop everyone and just send 4 the whole time and just sort of crowd the throwing lanes. And that's what the Bears did in this game. They didn't blitz too much. They picked key spots where they sent everybody, where it's like, fuck it, we just got to force him to get the ball out immediately and get some heat on him. And those did work. But ultimately, the offensive line penalties setting some of these drives back where, you run it for 7 yards on first down, but as a holding penalty. Now it's 1st and 20. Then it's, 2nd and 18 instead of, 2nd and 3, and maybe you run it again. Now, it's 2nd and 15. You're not going to run. So there's a lot of, I do think they would have stuck with the run more than they did if the offensive line didn't keep shooting them in the foot. But even still, for the Vikings, for Kevin O'Connell, 40 pass attempts to 29 rushes. Not a bad split, especially considering the circumstances. The ESPN Muppets are still, you should beat the crap out of a team like this. I can't. They're 12-2, but I can't put them in the same class as the other 12-2 teams because they should have won this game 45-0. And I agree they should have won it 45-0, but it completely discredits what the defense did. The offense shot themselves in the foot a few times with the penalties on the offensive line. Yeah, the block punt, but the defense shut it down. Again, the Bears didn't convert a third down until halfway through the fourth quarter. They converted one third down in the game and one fourth down in the game. And I believe they went for 4 fourth down conversions and 13 third down conversions. So 2 for 17 on third and fourth down. Vikings just shut them down. Like, again, it's the Bears. You're not going to play teams as bad and as just like ready to fucking pack it in and go to Cabo in the playoffs. Like, you're not dealing with that. But we've seen this Vikings defense do this type of thing against playoff caliber teams. We've seen them when the Lions were at full strength and they're putting up 50 points every week, hold them to 31 points. We've seen them blank the Packers in the first half and go up 28-0 on them. We've seen them absolutely body the Houston Texans. So again, I understand if you're ranking the teams, you would put Detroit and you would put Philly above Minnesota, but to say that Minnesota is clearly not in the same conversation as them, to me, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Because they still don't trust Sam Darnold, but at the same time, they're going to sit up there on national TV and they're going to try and tell you that the Vikings are idiots if they don't re-sign Darnold. Well, which is it? Do you not trust them, or the Vikings idiots if they don't re-sign him? Because why would they be idiots if they're re-signing someone that you don't trust? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make any, and there's no nuance to the discussion because it's ESPN, and ESPN is a joke. But the Muppets, they're still not buying. I'll give Ryan Clark his due, his explanation of it. I get what he's saying, but the rest of them are just kind of like they're just saying stupid stuff. Like Swagoo sitting up there saying like he literally on TV said, they beat the Bears a couple times. They beat these other teams. They beat the Titans. I need to see them beat the Packers. I got news for you, Swagoo. Vikings beat the Packers in Lambeau, and we're up 28-0 at halftime. And I'm not saying that to disrespect the Packers, who are a really damn good football team. But that's my point, is the Packers are a damn good football team, and we went into their house and not just beat them, but hung 28-0 on them in the first half. Don't sit up here and say, I need to see them beat the Packers. They beat the Packers. Do your research. Clowns, man. Absolute clowns on that network. But ultimately, Vikings get it done 30-12. It's a 3-score game. They win by 18 points. Should it have been 40-0, 45-0? Yes, but like they beat them by 3 scores in a league where, what was it, 2 weeks ago, they had the stat 79% of games played throughout the season to that point have been decided by 1 score or less, and you go beat a divisional rival that took you to overtime a month ago, and you beat them by 3 scores. But that's not good enough. The nitpick, and Ryan Clark pointed this out, so I'll give him his due. I'll let him slide on this for perceived disrespect. That they were too sloppy on the offensive line, too many penalties, and I 100% agree. If you're that sloppy and you have that many penalties on the offensive line, Seattle could steal it from you next week in Seattle. Green Bay probably going to take it from you if you're that sloppy against them in 2 weeks at home against Green Bay. And even with the defense just bleeding body parts in Detroit, you're going to lose to Detroit if you're that sloppy on the offensive line. But, I mean, maybe not, because, again, the Vikings did find ways to convert after shooting themselves in the foot, and Detroit's defense is just beat to shit. But it ain't a recipe for success. Like, if you're playing that sloppy week to week with these penalties on the offensive line, you ain't going on a Super Bowl run. But they're not playing that sloppy week to week. They're just not. This is just a sloppy game for whatever reason. So, I don't know. Vikings have to be considered contenders. Again, if you're ranking it team by team, No, I'm not putting the Vikings as the top team in the league, but if you're going tier by tier, you can't tell me a 12-2 Minnesota Vikings team is not in that tier. You can't tell me they're not in the top contender tier. All these teams got questions. The Lions defense is beat to shit, as we litigated. The Chiefs are using black magic to win week after week in surprising and frustrating new ways for all of us that are not Chiefs fans. The Bills got a ton of problems on defense. I mean, how many points did the Bills give up? They gave up over 40 points 2 weeks in a row. Like, the Bills' defense is struggling. It's just Josh Allen is Superman right now. And that's why you believe in the Bills, and that's why you would say the Bills are the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl right now. Last time I checked, they were plus 400. Next best team, I think, was plus 450, plus 475. The Eagles, I think it was plus 475 for the Eagles. And there's that faith, and you're putting the Bills in that category because of what Josh Allen's doing. But Minnesota, it's like, where's the glaring weakness? Week to week, 1 week, the defense might not be as good as they have been in previous weeks. The next week, maybe the offense isn't putting up as many points as we're accustomed to them putting up. But there's no like specific glaring weakness, unless you want to say faith in Sam Darnold. But like, we've seen Sam Darnold play a rough, bordering on bad stretch of football earlier in the year, and he completely bounced back from it. And his 2 worst games of the year, they won both of those games because the defense just stepped it up and put their foot on the other team's throat. And then in games where maybe the defense is giving up some points because you're playing a team that has some ability on offense, the offense will come out and throw for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns. So there's no like specific. The weakness with the Vikings is they've yet to put it all together in one game, other than the Texans game way back in September. I don't know that that's a weakness. I don't think it's a weakness. I think it's a situation where if they don't put it all together for the stretch run, like, they might not. They don't have like Superman quarterback that has the experience in the playoffs that's going to come in and bail you out if everything's going wrong. But there's no good reason at the. I'm not saying the Vikings are going to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they're going to the NFC Championship game. I'm not saying if they had to go into Philadelphia or they had to go into Detroit in the playoffs that you shouldn't pick Detroit or Philadelphia in those games. What I'm saying is there's no good reason the Minnesota Vikings at 12-2, who control their own destiny to get the number 1 seed, by the way, thank you very much, should not be put in that top tier unless you are separating the tiers and you're putting Philly in their own tier because of how they're playing right now, and you're bumping the Lions down because of the defensive injuries. You're bumping the Bills down because of how just not great, not good their defense is, and you're bumping the Chiefs down because Patrick Mahomes has a mild high ankle sprain and has not played particularly great all year long, but they got a great defense. But you're going to bump them down because they got to use black magic to bail themselves out of these games. If you're going to separate them in those tiers where the Eagles are standing alone at the top, then I can respect that more than the Bills and the Eagles and the Lions and the Chiefs and maybe even the Ravens. They're in this tier up here, but then the Vikings are in the next tier. Not that. That ain't reality. Get it together. That ain't reality. But that was the Vikings game. My Minnesota Vikings, 12-2. Who would have thought it? Not even me. I thought in the absolute best case scenario that everything pans out. Kevin O'Connell whispers into Sam Darnold's ear and pulls out all that potential that made him the 3rd overall pick. Every single offensive or offseason free agent signing turns out to be an absolute monster success, which they have been. Everything, just everyone stays healthy. Everything goes best case scenario. I thought, this team could win 11 games. They're a 7-11 win team, was my thought, depending on how different factors played out. They're a 12-win team, and they still got 3 games to go, baby. Again, they control their own destiny. to get the number 1 seed. But that's Monday night. Now let's move into the ESPN. For as much as I've shit on them, I do love the ESPN playoff machine.
Let me talk to you.
All right, people. Change of plans. I'm pushing the ESPN playoff machine till later in the week. I know I keep teasing it. It's been a couple weeks now. I keep teasing it, and it keeps getting pushed back. But I'll a little behind the scenes here. I recorded the second part of this episode last night. Today is now Wednesday. It is no longer at this point in the pod a Let Me Talk to You Tuesday. It's just Wednesday. I recorded the second half last night, and because I got some breaking news across the desk, found a couple interesting stats that I wanted to go back to the Monday night games and talk about. And sure enough, I go to put them together, and for some reason, just didn't record audio on the second half. Can't explain it. Can't explain it. Mic was plugged in, settings were correct, same as they always been, and for some reason just did not record audio at all. So I'm going to attempt to recreate part 2 as best as I can, and then, like I said, we're going to do the pick show, and Caesar is blowing me up right now, and I'm getting these sound notifications. Let me mute this if I possibly can, and we'll record the pick show, and at some point later this week, before Sunday, I will do a special bonus episode on Stop Texting Me. Close out the app, and it just keeps on keeping on. I don't know why. So we'll see how it goes. What day it'll come out? Maybe Friday, maybe Saturday. We'll see. But as I was recording yesterday, as soon as I stopped recording, the first part that recorded sound properly, got some news across the desk that the Atlanta Falcons are moving to Michael Penix Jr. as the starting quarterback. Michael Penix Jr. is in. Kirk Cousins is out. The Buffalorian messaged me. He was talking to a good friend of his who's a Falcons fan. It was just like, we could have never seen this coming. We not Penix coming in, but the downfall of Kirk Cousins. We could have never seen this coming. And Tanner was basically like, yeah, you could have. And I don't think to the extent that it has been. I do think this just like precipitous fall off of a cliff the last month and change was not predictable. But I do think you have a 37-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles, a guy who was a 500 quarterback up until his first year with Kevin O'Connell, where they went 13-4. You know, I mean, you look it up. His entire career prior to 2022, a 500 quarterback. Puts up great counting stats, but a 500 quarterback. You watch the Netflix special, you see that he finally started going to a sports psychologist, which I do think helped because we also learned I don't know if this was in the Netflix documentary. I don't think it was. I think this is just sort of like information that we as Vikings fans knew from various, reportings and things like that, that there's a key moment in Kirk Cousins' football career in college at Michigan State where Michigan State was winning. He stayed aggressive, was hunting downfield. He threw a pick, and they end up losing the game. And he said from that moment forward, he never wants to be the reason his team loses a game. And I think that mentally affected him in a negative way. I think it's why so many of Kirk Cousins' games are one-score games, that he gets the lead and he becomes ultra conservative and doesn't want to push the ball down the field, doesn't want to push the ball past the sticks, doesn't want to stay on it, doesn't want to stay hungry, stay aggressive. It's just like, okay, what do we have to do to maintain this lead? And that's why you look over the course of the last 3+ years that he was with the Vikings, It was like them and the Chargers had by far the most one-score games. And we had the stat a couple weeks ago, 79% of games this season are one-score games, which is a lot, but it was literally, it was like, it felt like every fucking game, win or lose, was a one-score game. And obviously 2022, they go 11-0 in one-score games. Kirk has his best year with Kevin O'Connell, the quarterback whisperer, whispering in his ear, plus the sports psychologist with the team, that he was starting to make some strides in that area. And, you see him become more clutch. And it does stretch back to the last couple years with Zim, where 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, Kirk Cousins 5-1, or I guess, and including this year, right? So going back to 2020, Kirk Cousins 5-1 in Monday Night Football. That started in 2020 against Seattle and Chicago. So he started getting over some of the stuff there later in the Zim years, but it was under Kevin O'Connell, the quarterback whisperer, who helped instill some confidence in him, helped sort of whisper out the self doubt and the negative thoughts. And so I think him going to Atlanta, number one, is too much money. I still love Kirk. I still think it's possible to win it. Well, it very least was possible to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, but it's too much money because he's proven he's not a guy other than 2022, which is a clear outlier. He is not a guy that is going to lift a team up above where the current talent level stands. Like, you look at Josh Allen, the MVP this year. If they had a league average quarterback, how many games would they win? Certainly not as many as they won now. What are they, 11-3? They ain't winning that many games throughout the course of the entire season without Josh Allen going full Superman on it. It's just not. It's not in the cards. Like, you get Amari Cooper halfway through the season. Keon Coleman was injured a little bit. They had some injuries in the tight end room. Matt Milano had been out virtually the entire season. Some other injuries on defense. Lost a bunch of pieces in the offseason. There's just not, from a talent perspective, outside of Josh Allen, not a great team, not a very good team. And Josh Allen elevates them. Those are the guys you pay that money to, because they're going to have to, because you're paying them so much of the salary cap that you can't fill out the roster with other pieces. It's tougher to sign quality depth guys. Like, the rest of your roster suffers when you pay a quarterback that much money. So you need a quarterback who can elevate the team. And Kirk had never showed that he could elevate a team in that way. He could put up great counting stats. He could win a handful of games, but he was a 500 quarterback. So paying him $45 million a year, I believe, $100 million guaranteed over 4 years at 37 years old, coming off a torn Achilles, probably a mistake. I mean, I clowned him the same way everyone else clowned him for drafting Michael Penix, but then I came back and saw it from a new light whenever it was I did that episode in the offseason, where the mistake wasn't drafting Penix. The mistake was paying Kirk because of all those reasons. You don't know how he's going to come off the Achilles. You don't have a quarterback whisperer on your coaching staff that's going to be able to continue the work that that Kevin O'Connell did with Kirk. And it's like going to therapy. Like, you hear people say, like, "Oh, I graduated therapy," and these are some of the most, like, fucked up people in need of therapy that you know. Like, you don't graduate from it. You could do some work where if you get away from it, you'll be all right for a while, but you're gonna slide back into some of those things. Like, I don't necessarily believe that if you need therapy of any kind, that you ever graduate from it and you're just good to go. Like, humans are creatures that you constantly need to be on top of. It's like if you work out real hard for a couple years and you get in great shape, you can't just say, "Oh, I don't need to work out anymore. I'm in great shape." You're going to gradually backslide. You may not get to where you were when you started. You may not get you may not be that bad, depending on how bad you were when you started. But you're not going to be as sharp. You're not going to be as cut as you were when you were at the peak of working out with consistency. So Kirk not having Kevin O'Connell to whisper in his ear, or anyone of the equivalent, of which there are very few, if any, in the league, in the world, coming off the Achilles, you're paying him all that money, and then you draft his replacement when part of the reason he left Minnesota is because they told him straight up, hey, we're probably going to draft a quarterback. And so we're not going to give you a bunch of years on your deal because we're going to transition to the young guy because you're 37 years old and you're coming off a torn Achilles. And then the Falcons draft Kirk's replacement before the Vikings do, which is a little detail in the whole thing that I still find hilarious. But like, where do you think that's going to put him mentally? And now he has never had anywhere close to as bad a stretch of football as he's had in the last month and change. Mentally, where do you think Kirk's going to be at? So if they hadn't drafted Michael Penix, they'd be fucked right now. They'd be on the hook with all this money with Kirk, and they'd be trying to talk themselves into how he's going to bounce back, and we got to keep rolling with Kirk because we're paying him all this money. But you have Penix there. You can put him in now, make this push for the playoffs. You have the tiebreaker over the Bucs because you beat them twice head to head. You're a game back, 3 games left. You just need to win the rest of your games, and you need Tampa Bay to slip up one time. And you're still not technically out of it in the wild card race with the Commanders, who play the Eagles this week. So the Commanders have at least one losable game on their schedule. I believe you'll need them to lose 2 games, and they would have to win out. But not completely out of the mix. They probably should have gone to Penix this week, but they still get the win, so it doesn't affect necessarily how things are moving forward. But I think when you look back, it was the right move to draft Penix, and maybe it was that they got more information after they signed Kirk, which just further demonstrates why that was a bad move to go pay him that much money if you then sign him to all that money and then find out, like, ooh, the Achilles isn't as good as we thought it was. Or you find out whatever personality things, whatever the case may be, where you're like, you know what, we got to draft Penix. Or maybe they did just fall in love with Penix in the process and really, we think he's going to be fantastic. Kirk's 37 coming off the Achilles. Even if he rides out 3 years of this deal, like, we love Penix. Like, we should draft this guy. So I don't know. We'll see how it pans out for Atlanta. We'll see how it pans out for Kirk Cousins, but I would not be shocked if this is the end of Kirk Cousins. I don't know if he has the infrastructure around him to mentally overcome not just this bad stretch of football, it's the worst stretch of football he's played in his entire football life, but to then get benched in the first year of a deal. Like, Atlanta has to cut him and they have to eat that cap. Like, I just don't see any way around it at this point. Like, you're not, Kirk ain't gonna stick around as a backup. He's gonna demand a trade or something. I don't know who's trading for that contract. So they're probably gonna have to cut him and eat that money. Again, it's $45 million a year, $100 million fully guaranteed. So it's gonna be a massive cap hit to eat next year. But luckily, they do still have a lot of their young playmakers are on their rookie deals, and they should be able to handle that from a cap perspective. But I mean, it's not the place you want to be. Obviously, paying someone, paying out $55 million of a contract for a guy that's not on your roster. But ultimately, I think it's the right move. You eat that money now and go from there and get that off the books. You still got 2 years of Michael Penix plus the 5th-year option, plus Drake London, Bijan, Pitts, all these guys still on rookie deals. I guess Pitts is probably coming up pretty soon, but you're not in the worst position in the world, even if you had to eat that money. So I think it's sad, but it's the smart move. I don't know where Kirk Cousins goes from here, but in other Vikings news, a handful of stats that came to my attention that I thought were interesting. Caleb Williams against the Vikings on Monday night. In the first half, his average depth of target which is to say every pass that he threw in the first half, how far past the line of scrimmage the intended receiver was when the ball got there. Average depth of target, Caleb Williams, first half against the Vikings, 0.1 yards. Not 1 yard, 0.1 yards. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that. A 0.1 ADOT is insane for an entire half of football. Every pass he threw averaged out to be zero point 0.1 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Nuts. Absolutely nuts. And this goes to show, because again, it's 3 straight weeks that the Bears have scored 0 points in the first half. They did move the ball fairly well, although mainly early on it was the run game that kind of got clamped down eventually. DJ Moore, they ran 3 times on one drive, I believe, and he was running with some effectiveness. They were running him out of the backfield. So, I don't know, given some interesting looks that may have worked early in the game with the Vikings missing Ivan Pace Jr., one of their best run defenders. But a 0.1 ADOT. Insane. Don't know if I've ever seen anything like that. I mean, I'm not hunting for ADOT stats because I'm not an analytics nerd, but when you see something like that come across, like, holy shit, that's pretty nuts. And sticking with the Vikings is another thing I saw after I finished recording the review of the Monday night games was Sam Darnold at 12-2 right now with my Minnesota Vikings. Third all time in the last, well, third in the last 40 years. Let me rephrase. Third in the last 40 years. Over the last 40 years, veteran quarterbacks changing teams. Only 2 veteran quarterbacks changing teams have won more games in their first season with their new team than Sam Darnold has this year with 3 games still to go. Steve McNair when he went to the Ravens, Peyton Manning when he went to the Broncos. They both won 13 games. So if Sam Darnold wins the next 2 games, then, because again, now it's a 17-game schedule. They were playing 16-game schedules. They win the next 2 games. Sam Darnold will stand alone at 14 wins in his first year as a veteran quarterback with a new team. And the man has to be respected. The man has to be respected. He's playing incredible football. He's week after week, he's doing things that, this hasn't been done in 20 years in the Vikings history. This has never been done in Vikings history. This has only been done 2 times prior in Vikings history. And the man needs his respect, and Kevin O'Connell needs just as much, if not more, respect for the reasons I was talking about with Kirk being the quarterback whisperer. I talked about it last week. I've been talking about it all year. You see what he's done with Sam Darnold. Under 500 quarterback his entire career. 12-2 right now under Kevin O'Connell. The Pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, 1-9 in his career, not under Kevin O'Connell. Under Kevin O'Connell, 2-2. Nick Mullins throwing for 400 yards a game with Kevin O'Connell as his quarterback. Kirk Cousins, a career 500 quarterback. Every year except that first year with Kevin O'Connell, 13-4. So, and I said this before, this is reason why Vikings fans freaking out about, if we don't pay Darnold, what if J.J. McCarthy's not any good? It's like, we were a 500 team with the Pastronaut. Nick Mullins was throwing for 400 yards. Sam Darnold was pulled out of a dumpster and has this team at 12-2. Like, there's no way that J.J. McCarthy is going to step into this situation and not be damn good at the very least, because everyone's managed. When you see guys that are first round talent that fail, it's almost exclusively that the organization failed the talent. There are outliers like Johnny Manziel, situations like that, and Tim Tebow to me was not a first round quarterback, and I think to most people going into the draft was not a first round quarterback, and for some reason was taken in the first round, but it's oftentimes an organizational fail. And when it's not, there are inherent, obvious character flaws. And when you look at J.J. McCarthy, those character flaws don't exist. Like, he's the ideal what you want as a quarterback in terms of his personality and how his leadership style, how he goes about his business, how he goes about his daily life. Just if you follow him on Instagram and watch his Instagram stories, he's a very mature guy, very mindful guy, very thoughtful guy. That, you know, he's if he's not posting stoic philosophy, he's posting different stats and things about his teammates. This is a guy who's, you know, he's coming back from the meniscus his rookie year. He's kind of an afterthought because of how well Sam Darnold's playing, but he's out here rooting for the guys. Justin Jefferson breaks a record. He's going to post something about it. Sam Darnold does. Again, first month of the season, Darnold had his first like monster game of the year, and who's the first person posting about it? J.J. McCarthy saying Sam Darnold good at football. So I don't think there's any cause for concern there. I'm pretty confident that J.J. McCarthy being the first hand-picked guy for KOC, not a guy that he's inheriting, not a guy that he's pulling off the scrap heap, but a guy that he's going out and finding and saying, this is a top 10 quarterback in this draft. Let's take him. Ain't no way that dude is not going to thrive under Kevin O'Connell, the way that all these other quarterbacks have exceeded far beyond what they've done anywhere else under Kevin O'Connell. And again, Sam Darnold, 2 more wins and he will stand alone in the last 40 years of a veteran quarterback changing teams and the amount of wins. Steve McNair, 13 wins. Peyton Manning, 13 wins. Sam Darnold has a chance to surpass that. But even if he doesn't, he's still top three. One more win in the final 3. He's tied for the last 40 years. Worth pointing out. But the last thing I want to point out with the Vikings is this. Because weekly, you know, I stayed away from it for a couple months. But the last few weeks I've been pounding the table saying, like, it's time to show the Vikings some respect. It's time to put them in the same category as the teams in which their record is commensurate. So think about it like this. They're 12-2. 2 losses. First loss to the Detroit Lions at the height of their powers. Near full strength. The only piece they were missing when the Vikings lost to Detroit. Detroit was missing Aiden Hutchinson. It was a big piece. Don't get me wrong. But they weren't missing Anzalone. They weren't missing Aleem McNeil. They weren't missing Carlton Davis. They weren't missing virtually everybody on the defense other than Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch right now. Like, their defense was playing like a top-tier unit. The most aggressive, most physical defense in the league. Their offense was at full strength. They still had David Montgomery. They put up 50 on people prior to that game. They put up 50 on people after that game. And the Vikings lost that game by 2 points, 31-29. Held the Lions offense, who, like I said, they were in the middle of hanging 50 on everybody. They held them to 31 points. They had a lead late, gave up a drive for a game-winning field goal at the very end, lose a tough, close game at home, but it's the Lions at the height of their powers. That, like, there's no shame in that loss. Obviously, you got to be able to beat a team like that if you want to win a Super Bowl. But again, they had the lead inside 2 minutes. The Lions just got ball last and managed to get down and get that field goal. So I think no matter how that game went, I feel like either team walked away thinking, like, we can beat that team. Even if the Lions lost, I think they walk away saying we should have won that game and we could beat that team. And the same with the Vikings. So that's their first loss. Then their second loss in LA to the Rams on a Thursday night, 3 days rest, only 4 days after they lost that game to Detroit, the most aggressive physical team in football, with David Montgomery pounding the rock down your throat, with that defense swarming, you know, again, most aggressive physical defense, bordering at times on a little bit dirty, by today's standards, and this is not me trying to criticize the Lions, it's just to demonstrate they were this year's Niners. Before all these injuries, they were this year's 49ers, where if you play them, you're going to lose next week. You're going to lose next week on full rest, Sunday to Sunday. So you're expected to play the most aggressive physical team in football in the Detroit Lions on a Sunday. Turn around on a Thursday, fly to Los Angeles on a Wednesday, play Thursday night football against a Rams team that got both of their receivers back, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua coming back from the injuries at that point in time. And they lost. It was a one-score game. That safety shouldn't have been a safety because of the face mask that was very obvious from two different refs' perspectives. They did not throw the flag for whatever reason. Vegas called down, wanted the Rams to cover the spread. But the fact is, I look at that and I feel a lot more confident because right now, if the playoffs started today, which they don't, but if they started today, the Vikings would play at the Rams. And I was a little like, we lost to the Rams at Los Angeles, and then I got to think, like, do I want to go to this game? If I go to this game, am I going to jinx it again? How is that going to work? And then when I thought about this, how the circumstances under which they lost that game, now they will have, if they play the Rams in the first round, they will be playing the Rams once again the week after playing the Detroit Lions. However, this current Detroit Lions team, not as aggressive, not as physical as the one they played earlier in the year because of all the injuries. It just is what it is. Like, the defense is beat to shit. Like, the defense is no longer beating you to shit. They're getting beat to shit. And then offensively, they still got a ton of weapons. They're still going to put up a ton of points. They still got guys, Goff playing excellent football. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jamison Williams still a big play threat. Jahmyr Gibbs, a constant big play threat. Like, the offensive line, fantastic. Like, they got all those guys out there. But they don't have David Montgomery. David Montgomery is Knuckles. He's the bludgeon. He's the guy that's beating you up physically. The rest of the team is sort of, I don't want to say high flying and finesse. I don't want to disrespect them, but like, having Montgomery is what allows you to just wear a team down to where then the high flying, more finesse. Again, this is not an insult to the Lions, but then the other pieces around, it makes them more effective because the defense is worn down from just getting beat in the face by David Montgomery the whole time. So you don't have him there. You're missing all these defensive pieces. Like, you're not getting nearly as beat up playing the Lions as you were earlier in the year. You're just not. So you don't have to worry about that as much. And then you're going to get a full week's rest. You're not flying to LA on 3 days rest after playing the most aggressive physical team in football. And essentially, again, the game, it was a one-score game. It was an 8-point game. It was a one-score game. Vikings ball, end of the game, and then the missed call on the face mask in the end zone was a safety, made it a 10-point game. But the Vikings had the ball, trying to move down the field to score, to tie the game late. And under all those circumstances. So I'm less, as a Vikings fan, I'm much less concerned. I'm not saying there's not some degree of like, oh, what if the Rams beat us and we lose in the first round again with after a monster season, but I don't have this fear of like, oh, we're gonna have to play one of the teams that beat us again. I look at it as we got an opportunity to beat Detroit the end the season, and even whether or not that gets us the 1 seed, depending on how things play out. Having to play Seattle, having to play Green Bay prior to that, we got a chance to avenge ourselves against Detroit. We got a chance to avenge ourselves against the Rams. Move into the second round of the playoffs, being able to say we beat every single team that we played this year. Lost a couple games, but we beat every single team that we played this year. And I think there's something to be said about that. So to that, I say, I don't know, I guess bring on the Rams. I don't particularly want to play Tampa Bay the way Baker's balling right now. Like the defense is starting to put it together a little bit more. Bucky Irving, unbelievable. Rashad White still doing his thing. Mike Evans is Mike Evans and continues to be Mike Evans. And as I said all year, Baker keeping the fires burning, and right now the fire rises. So I don't know that anyone wants to play Tampa Bay right now, but I guess yeah, time to respect the Vikings, man. They're still disrespecting us. I'll give RC his credit on ESPN. You know, he explained the nuance to why he still wasn't putting them in that top tier, but everyone else just kind of like Swagoo talking about, listing off all the bad teams they beat, and then literally saying, I need to see them beat the Packers. We beat the Packers. Beat the Packers in Lambeau. We beat the Packers in Lambeau up 28-0 at halftime. Like, look at the schedule, dude. What are you talking about? Fucking ridiculous. The national media Muppets, man, they cannot get out of their own way. Rich Eisen gets my respect because he constantly talks about the Vikings when they are worth talking about, and I respect that. But the ESPN Muppets, man, just awful. Give the Vikings their respect. They lost 2 games out of 14, one of them to the unquestioned best team in football at the time, at the height of their powers, as close to full strength as they've been since the very beginning of the season. And then they lost to a Rams team that now everyone's trying to hype up as, the hottest team in football, a team nobody wants to play, and nobody wants to play, and they lost to the Rams on a short week, coming off of playing the most aggressive physical team in football. And other than that, they've won every single game. They've won every single game. They need to be in that top tier unless, like I said, unless you're putting the Eagles on their own tier right now because Detroit is dealing with all the injuries. The Chiefs have to use devil magic to pull out these ridiculous wins week after week. The Bills have a very suspect defense that Josh Allen is having to go Superman week after week to pull out these wins. And I mean, who else are we putting in that tier? Baltimore, doubtful. Pittsburgh hasn't looked as great recently. So unless you're saying the Eagles right now, offense, defense, we saw the pass game go off this past week. We know what Saquon's doing. The defense is playing lights out. If you're putting the Eagles alone at the top, the way we were putting Detroit alone at the top for a long stretch of the season. Unless you're doing that, if you're saying, the Eagles are top contenders, the Bills are top contenders, Detroit is a top contender, the Chiefs are a top contender. If you're saying all those teams are a top contender and you're not putting the Vikings in that tier, you're fucking up. There's no way around it. You're fucking up. But that's going to be it for this show. Let me talk to you on a Wednesday, with a re-recording because of technical difficulties that I can't explain. Maybe it's on Riverside. Maybe it's on their platform, not on me. I hope it's not on me because I don't know what the hell I would have done that would have screwed it up. But either way, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe. Please comment. Tell me what I'm missing, what we should be talking about relative to your favorite team, unless your favorite team is one of these dumpster fire teams that we'll get to. I'm going to do a full top of the draft, top 5 pick quarterback dive in the offseason because I enjoy that stuff. So we'll talk about your bad teams then. But everyone who's got a team that is in the playoffs or could make the playoffs is still in contention. What am I missing? What should we be talking about? What should the national media Muppets be talking about? Follow on Instagram at FootballHeads Show with 2 S's as at FootballHeads Show with 2 S's on Instagram. We'll be back with the pick show, and I'm going to do a bonus episode. I promise it's coming. I keep teasing it. The ESPN, for all of their flaws, their playoff machine is a very fun device. We're going to pull up the playoff machine. If you are a podcast listener, I would recommend tuning in to the YouTube, to the video for that episode, because I'm going to have the website up so we're going to be able to see what's happening, because I'm going to try my best to explain exactly what's happening on screen for the podcast listeners. But I would recommend watching the video for that. But that's going to come up, bonus episode later in the week. A lot to look forward to. We're in the home stretch, 3 weeks left. Ton of great games coming up this weekend. A stacked Saturday, a good Thursday night football game, a massively consequential Thursday night football game coming up this week. Kind of a rough slate. Kind of a rough slate at 1 o'clock on Sunday, but it's to be expected. We're late in the season, so more teams are falling off. But the fight rages on. Teams trying to make the playoffs. Nothing like football. The only thing close to playoff football is end of the season football, when everyone's scrapping and clawing for football. So like, subscribe, comment, follow, do all the fun stuff. And until next time, take it easy, football heads.
The Bears are who we thought they were.